Today we're going to make a coffee table out of concrete and steel. This video is sponsored by University of Phoenix. I'll tell you why I went back to school and became a student again a little bit later in the video. I've always really liked the proportions of traffic cones and was curious to see how a concrete version would look. I made frames out of 2x4s that would hold the cones upside down, and then I taped over the holes on the ends of them with some duct tape. Now I wasn't sure which size cone would work best for the coffee table, so I just decided to make one of each size. Concrete is quite heavy, so I used heavy-duty C-clamps to clamp the cones to the 2x4 frames. I mixed and poured some Quikrete 5000 into the cones, making sure to vibrate and tap the sides of the cones to try to get out as many of the air bubbles as possible. After letting the concrete cure for 48 hours, I removed the clamps and peeled back the soft vinyl cones. The cones were completely unharmed during the process, which is great because I want to use them again for other projects. I drilled 3 holes in the bottom of the concrete cones, and then hot glued in some furniture feet. I got a scrap piece of plywood and then drilled a 4-inch diameter hole and a 4.5-inch diameter hole in it. This is just so that I can test out different heights for the table by sliding this test board over the concrete cones. I tried the 4-inch diameter hole first, but it was just a little bit too high, so I switched to the 4.5-inch diameter hole and then took the measurement for the height of the table. I had the guys at the steel yard cut a piece of 3/16 of an inch thick plate steel to use as the table top. I used a hammer and a punch to put a little dent in the steel that'll allow me to drill a hole through it without the drill bit slipping. I used some cutting oil to help lubricate the bits and also distribute the heat. Using a hole saw on wood is challenging enough as it is, but on steel it's at a whole nother level. And I almost broke my wrist a few times when the hole saw got caught on the steel because I wasn't at the perfect perpendicular angle. Alright, it's time to talk about the sponsor for this video, University of Phoenix. Now I recently became a student again and took a course called Innovative and Creative Business Thinking. Now I didn't do this just for fun, I did this because I actually started a new company called Maker Brand. Maker Brand is bringing tools and materials to market, and that requires a significant investment of time and money. Now I want to protect those things, so that's why I decided to educate myself a little bit with this course. It was an online 5-week course and it was very productive. In particular, I really enjoyed the case studies. It's always a good idea to see how even when people have good ideas and are really smart, they can still make mistakes that send their businesses into trouble. Another great aspect of the course was the online discussion groups with the other students. I could throw out some ideas that I had for Maker Brand relative to the readings that we had just done and get really good critical feedback from my classmates. So if you're interested in learning more, click on the link in the description box below. All right, back to the build. After a good 15 minutes of struggle, I had managed to cut about 75% of the way around the hole. But that last little part was proving quite difficult because I hadn't done a good job keeping the drill perfectly straight. But I just switched to a metal cutting blade on my jigsaw and was able to easily cut the rest of the circle. Now in order to cleanly bend metal this thick, it's helpful to cut a groove about halfway through the steel. I used a speed square and a silver Sharpie to draw a line across the steel and then use my angle grinder to cut a groove. Remember the distance that I measured from the scrap board and the cone? Well, that distance is going to be the height of the leg of the table, and I just drew another line across the steel and then this time cut all the way through. In a previous video that was all about bending steel, I made this contraption out of 2x4s. It's really just a rack that you can stand on and clamp things to. I clamped a scrap piece of angled steel right along the line that I had scored with the grinder. I then clamped some 2x4s to the piece of steel that I want to bend. I now have 2 nice long handles that give me a leverage advantage for bending the steel. I couldn't quite get it to 90 degrees though on the first bend, so I removed the angle steel and ground down a little bit more and then was able to bend it all the way to 90 degrees. I now have a bent piece of steel with a hole in it, sort of like a backwards cornhole board. Some of the edges were a little bit sharp, so I used my angle grinder with a flap disc to round them all over. And look at that, fits perfectly. I cleaned the steel with acetone before sealing it with a coat of paste wax. I just rubbed on the wax, waited 15 minutes, and then rubbed it all out. Without reinforcement, the table has a little bit of a bow to it and certainly bends a bit when you sit on it, but quickly regains its shape. Now this is actually the third incarnation of a cone table. The first one I made while I was a student in college. Jessie made the second one, and here we have this nice industrial looking version. Thanks for watching, check out some of our other videos, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram if you haven't already. Thanks, bye.